Hello and welcome to Backyard Farmer. We're glad you could join us for another hour of good gardening. If you've got questions, we've got answers to all of those gardening and landscape problems. If you'd like to submit a question to our panel, you can dial 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. The toll-free number is 800-676-5446. You can send your emails and your pictures as JPEG attachments to byf@unl.edu. We answer those on a future show. And if you would, please give us as much information as you can about your question, including where you live. We will not stalk you. So don't forget to follow Backyard Farmer during the week, also on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Pinterest. Starting our program tonight, we're going to look at samples. And Tom Weisling, it's your first appearance, and you've got a curly whirly there.
This is some kind of tree, fir? Maybe
Yes.
fir tree. Okay. Well, if you look at the tips of the fir tree here, what we have are kind of, it almost looks like it has herbicide damage or some side of pesticide damage or mechanical damage of some sort. But it's actually caused by balsam twig aphids, which get on these, they have a couple generations. The first generation is called a stem mother. She lays eggs, and then once the little aphids get on the little needles that are developing the buds, they cause this kind of distorted growth. So it almost looks like a gall, but it can be mistaken for herbicide injury. The tree's going to outgrow this. This is just going to last a few weeks. But the added benefit you get, and let me see if I can find it, is it attracts a lot of predators. So you can get ladybugs and lacewings on there, and this is a ladybug larvae right on the back. So it's been, and I actually went to the tree to grab the sample earlier today, and there were just all kinds of these little ladybug larvae on there. So I'm going to take this home, and I'm going to let that ladybug larvae loose in my yard.
Awesome. Excellent. Thanks, Tom. That's an interesting sample. All right, Rock. Kill it or keep it, right?
Well, and that's, we get into this debate about what we should control and what we shouldn't. And earlier this year, I noticed a fair amount of people talking about controlling dandelions would be bad because they're really good for for pollinators. Excuse me. And I have a pollinator garden. I think we need to work on promoting anything that's going to bring in pollinators and help them survive. But dandelions are wind pollinated. Most of the wind pollinated species lack essential amino acids. So they're really good early forage for bees, but in terms of something that's really just going to pop their appetite and cork, it's going to be something like a white clover or some of the other legumes flowers. And that's because they're not wind pollinated, they're pollinated by the movement of the bees and the mosquitoes and the other things so if you really want to choose something to not control, something like white clover on the back of an acreage or something, you could actually physically seed it. It's available at a lot of places and get it in there. But for those people that want that picture perfect lawn, and they don't like the dandelions, we're not going to really put a strong limit on the number of dandelions by controlling them in the lawns, because all you have to do is go by the park. And they really have limited feed value except for very early in the season. So that said, I'm going to say let's concentrate on not controlling the ones that are actually beneficial. And the last thing I'm going to say is that dandelions should never be controlled in the spring anyway. It's just a waste of money and time, and it's maybe a little bit entertaining to the people that sold you the jug, but let's not promote that. So let's control dandelions in the fall like they should be. If the bees forage on them, good for them. There's a lot of other early season forage, but I'd rather say let's leave the white clover lay and let the bees and other pollinators work that.
I'm touched. Thank you for caring so much about our pollinators.
All right, Lauren, before they get all weepy on us, what'd you bring?
I need a Kleenex.
Try to keep it going here. We had a beautiful spring, a lot of great-looking flowering crabapple trees out there, but one disease that we see a lot in flowering crabs is the scab. And I brought along tonight just some early stages of scab. So one of the things I want to point out too is where some of the inoculum or the start of the disease comes. These are some fruit mummies from last year, and you kind of see they're kind of fuzzy and gray, and they're producing lots of spores that are then going over. And then we've got leaves like this one where you got the little area where they get twisted. You get some distorted leaves, you get some leaves that have little shadows. You can kind of see some little gray areas on there. All the initial stages of scab. So at this point now, it's better to treat for scab earlier in the year. But even now, if you have a tree that you're really trying to protect, you could still make an application to that. The key is to know that it's not going to kill the tree, though. It's just going to be defoliated late. So if you see those flowering crabapple trees later in the year, they're usually defoliated. That's usually scab. One other thing you can do if you're looking for a crabapple tree now is make sure you use disease-resistant cultivars. So, select one that doesn't get scab, because we're definitely going to have that every year.
All right, thank you, Lauren. All right, Sarah, this is showing up a little early this year too, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is, Kim. I brought here with me a sample of trees here that are showing some problems with iron chlorosis. And so the classic iron chlorosis symptoms you can see here with the lighter tissue between the veins and then the darker green veins. And so what I really wanted to say about the sample, though, is that this is the time of year, if you need to do a trunk injection, and typically iron chlorosis is treated with a trunk injection of iron. But if you were going to do a trunk injection for other things like emerald ash borer control, this is the time of year to do it, because trees are the transpirational pull of product from the roots or from an injection in the trunk is moving up the trees now very well, since the trees have leafed out and they're pulling that product in well. So this is the time of year to do that type of an application. For emerald ash borer, the trunk injections would go until probably about mid to late June, and then you'd want to stop because trees don't take chemical in as well later in the summer as they do during this early period. Now, if you have a tree like this that has iron chlorosis, there's a great publication from the Forest Service called Iron Chlorosis, and you can find it on their website under their publications section. Aside from trunk injections, there's also a couple of good ways to do soil treatments to control iron chlorosis, and they can provide some good long-term control. So look for that if you're having trouble with iron chlorosis in your trees.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Okay, Tom, you get the first picture.
Yay.
This is from Blair, and he says, we wouldn't believe this. If he burned the turf off his yard and threw a sheet over the dirt, it would look like a sheet on top of 100 golf balls. Worm middens used to be a squiggle. Now they're huge, risky just to walk through it. He says they're making little teepees over their holes. What in the world is going on? And he knows worms are beneficial, but he's kind of scratching his head over this.
Earthworms are funny little creatures. It took me forever to figure out on a patio. I put a patio in and there were little sticks sticking out between the rocks, and I could never figure out how they got there until I actually watched worms grab the little sticks and drag them down. And they will actually pull organic material down into their little burrows, and they let it sit there for just a few days and kind of let it rot a little bit, and then they'll feed on that. Worms feed on decaying vegetation. Decaying organic matter. And then they process it. They do a great job. They run it through their system, then they poop it all out. And then the castings are what really help fertilize plants. So you got the benefits of aeration. They're moving the topsoil around, creating topsoil, and you have just all kinds of nutritive benefits from them. Even the slime contains nitrogen. So all around, they're really good to have. Absolutely no reason to get rid of them, but this is just a sample of them just trying to pull materials down into the burrows. It's a really weird thing, but that's in the invertebrate world that I'm used to. So
should he just rake them flat if he hates them?
If you don't, disperse them. I think that'd be a great thing. Or take your leaf blower out there, or get a few worms.
All right, thanks, Tom. All right, Rock, let's see. This is a Seward viewer. Grassy weed greened up around the same time as the bluegrass. They know it's not bluegrass. They thought barnyard grass, and they think they're going to kill it up and dig and then reseed in the fall when they should. They do want to selectively kill now, and they did send us some good additional pictures.
Well, they sent some really good ones, and the one that's right there, if we could just hold on that picture, I'd appreciate it. That one of the key grass identifying characteristics is the compressed or a flattened stem, so that breaks it down to a number of species. And if she hadn't sent the all the pictures that she sent, we wouldn't have been able to figure this one out. But between all the 3 pictures she sent, so compressed stem, usually almost all of the summer annual grasses, crabgrass, barnyard grass, the one she mentioned, have flattened stemmed. But that one, this greened up at the same time, but bluegrass says it must be a C3 or a cool season grass. And when we saw the picture with the seed head, that's the emerging seed head of orchard grass, which is we commonly see it where an off-the-shelf uncertified seed bag is used. And I'm not saying that they did or didn't do that, but that's often where we see orchard grass, because from these uncertified seed fields, they're grazed by animals, and the animals graze on orchard grass, and it passes through the gut and isn't harmed in any way. Actually, it breaks its dormancy. So it could be that is a contaminant in the seed they used. I can't guarantee that one way or the other, so I'm not throwing the company under the bus, but or it could have just blown in. A bird could have brought it in, could have used some of it, because it is kind of a stiff stem. They could have used it for nesting material. Could have come from a number of places, but they've got a pretty serious infestation in there. They're going to probably have to nail it with Roundup once again in right before they seed, and probably a couple of doses to really knock it back. It's not a real aggressive. It's a bunch grass, so it doesn't have rhizomes or stolon, so it doesn't really aggressively spread, but it does spread from seed. So I just keep it mowed, keep the seed head off, don't let it get that rank, and they should be fine with the fall seeding and fescue over the top if they hit it with Roundup.
All right, thank you, Rock. This is a granddaughter of a very loyal viewer, Lauren. She said this fell from her tree with a huge branch. She thinks it's a jelly fungus, and she's wondering if that is indeed a jelly fungus.
Yeah, and actually, if our viewers could touch that, it does feel kind of like it's got a very jelly-like feel to it. And I believe this is a Auricularia species. A couple things about that, that group does have some that are edible. At the same time, I wouldn't recommend eating this by any means. So be careful, because we're doing this from a picture, and I never really recommend anyone eat any of our wild collected fungi unless you really know what you're doing, or you're with someone that does, because some of them are very deadly. So it is a jelly fungus. I believe it's in the genus Auricularia, similar to some of the ones, again, not to eat it, but what you'd find in the Asian restaurant in hot and sour soup.
Really?
The little black things.
Little black things that look like jelly fungus.
Yeah, same thing.
All right, thanks, Lauren. Sarah, this is a Carney viewer with boxwoods that look pretty terrible. Leaves are turning yellowish. She says it sounds like every other one is wintergreen or green mountain, and they've lost one entirely. So what do we think here?
So this is winter damage, or winter desiccation, to be a little more accurate. So, since boxwoods are evergreen and they do transpire or lose water more through the foliage than other plants do. And some cultivars of boxwood are just a lot more prone to winter damage like this than others. So the ones that are showing the winter damage are the wintergreen cultivar, and the Green Mountain is the one that is still looking good. So, what can you do about this in the future? Well, you could possibly use an anti-desiccant. That's kind of a waxy material that you spray on the foliage in the fall that helps. It provides a barrier, and it helps hold the water in the leaves better during the winter months. You have to reapply it about every 4 to 6 weeks during the winter. That might help a little bit. Also, make sure the boxwoods are really well irrigated going into the winter, so that they're well hydrated as they move into the winter months. And maybe some winter watering. So those would be the ways that I would go about trying to avoid that as much as possible.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, we get questions from time to time about those pesky ants in our houses, but outdoors, they provide a myriad of benefits. Our first feature tonight focuses on ants and why our entomologists love them.
I love ants. Do you love ants, Jody?
Of course I do. I love ants.
Why do you love ants?
Well, I love ants because they're social insects. Social creatures, just like me.
Yeah.
Social, fearless, hardworking.
What does it mean to be a social insect?
Well, social insects are like a large superorganism, and they have a structured caste system, so each individual ant has a specific job. So their job could be foraging for food, or building tunnels, cleaning out the chambers, piling up the dead ants, feeding and caring for the baby ants, and also taking care of the queen. The queen's job is to lay all the eggs, so she should be taken care of.
Which ones are we looking at right now?
I think these are pavement ants. So why do you love ants?
I love ants because of the biocontrol services that they provide. Ants are really, really hungry critters. They need to forage for all those workers and the queen and everybody that's in the colony. And so they're constantly out in these hunting packs looking for food to take back home. and they can control lots of different pests for us. We have several studies that show they help to control white grubs in the lawn, or things like cutworm caterpillars by eating the little tiny caterpillars and the eggs. And they even eat things like hornworm caterpillars when they're small. So if you want fewer pests, it's usually best to have higher amounts of ants in the landscape. All they want is room and board. So they just need to live outdoors and sort of take care of your pests for you.
Well, people seem to really freak out when they get in their house.
Yeah, and I understand that. You don't want ants in your house. That's your prerogative, because it's your house. They didn't get invited. I like to use some integrated pest management approaches when I approach an ant problem. And so that includes going around, figuring out how they got inside, what holes they're utilizing by your window or under your door or in a screen, and try to seal those up a little bit better so the ants can't actually get inside. Some people use a perimeter spray. So that's a spray of insecticide 1 foot up the foundation and then 3 feet out. But that's your mileage will vary with that. There could be success with it, or you could see some troubles with it. I think that there's another approach though that you tend to prefer.
You can also use baiting. So that's an ant bait, and you put the sweet, sugary, toxic goodness out, and you have to be patient because the ants have to do their thing and take that food back to the colony.
But I still love ants.
I love ants too.
With all the benefits that ants provide, as long as they stay outside, I think we've all agreed that we love them all. So what's not to love about Jody and Jonathan on their bellies with their noses in ant holes?
In Asia, they eat them. They have the big ants that they eat. They're kind of tasty, but a little tad crunchy.
And on that
So I love
note-
ants too.
Experienced.
All right, Tom, your next question is in Sarpy County by Wearspan Lake. 8-year-old autumn blazed maple that has these egg-looking things all over. What are they, and would they be of any concern?
Maple bladder gall. So before I answer the last part, I'll talk about it. We got to set the stage. These are actually not caused by insects. They're little itty-bitty tiny mites, Eriophyid mites, that overwinter like on the bark, and then when the buds are breaking and the leaves are starting to form, they don't go running over to the leaf, but they get onto the leaf and they start feeding. And they change the chemistry of the plant, and the plant starts to actually go around the little Eriophyid mite. So you got this little mite inside of these things, and it's protected. It's like in its own little condo. And she's in there and she'll lay eggs. And as she grows, the gall gets bigger and bigger. It changes from green color to develops kind of a pretty red color, and then it becomes almost black as it reaches the end of its little stage. But really, they're not causing any problems for the tree, even under heavy infestations. They may cause a little bit of leaf curling. You may lose some leaves, but the tree generally has no issues with this. So maybe a little bit unsightly. I take the approach as an entomologist. Wow, that's really neat looking. And not everybody shares that, but there's nothing you need to do with it.
I think it just looks like measles.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Rock, your next picture is what are these? I have this stuff everywhere, and this is a Sioux City viewer.
Ooh, so Sioux City, I'm thinking that they're not as far along as they are down here further south. That looks like curly dock to me in the small stage. Curly dock is a perennial, but it merges early and really pops. We're seeing a fair amount of it in all over along the roadsides, and along the roadsides because they get that heating effect. They've already got a seed head on them. But that far north, I'm going to say that's curly dock, and I don't know if they were looking for a suggested control, but they can be, if you cut deep enough on the stem, they can be hand pulled and cut. You can't really pull them out because they have a pretty robust root on them, or spot treat them with something like Roundup or any one of the non-selectives.
Not mare's tail.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's one of the things they were wondering.
Didn't look like mare's tail to me.
Okay.
You want to correct me, don't you?
No, I don't think it's curly dock, but I don't know whether it's mare's tail. You've got Doc next, so we can look at them and decide.
Oh, yeah, and that'll definitely prove me wrong. Good for you.
Or it'll be small curly dock. All right, and talking about curlies, you have, Lauren, 3 people that have peaches. Some leaves are turning red, orange, and curling up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry. That is one of the best pictures of peach leaf curl I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, and they're all wanting to know what to do about peach leaf curl.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, first I would really enjoy it, but then if you want to manage it, The biggest thing is this year we had a perfect year for a lot of our infections for peach leaf curl. There's also, it's caused by a fungus in the genus Tophrina. There's also one that affects oak trees, so some of you may even be seeing this on oaks. And what it is, when our buds break, when the tree's buds break and they're open and they have cracks in them, these spores of these fungi will go in and infect. And then as that leaf's developing, it grows in there. And that's why you see that expanded, that growth that's not normal, because it's actually growing and altering the growth of the leaf. To control it, you really need to be back, with dormant sprays at that before bud break stage, so you can get at those spores so they're not getting into there and making those infections. So nothing to do right now, but recognize you have it. And if we have a spring in future years where you have those warm times and then cool times where you got those buds start to swell and open up and then come out, that's when you want to be after them.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. Sarah, this is a viewer who has summer glow bird cherry, which is an unusual species. But she says it's only getting foliage on the new growth and is wondering, is this a deficiency? Is this a characteristic of the species?
Well, I have to disagree a little bit there, Kim, because it's not just the new growth that has leaves. You can see the brighter green leaves there, which is the new growth, but the older leaves are the smaller ones that are a little bit darker green, and that is probably 2- or 3-year-old wood there. So, but I understand what they're saying. They do have sections of the stems there farther toward the inner part of the canopy that are bare. And so my thought is there that possibly this is a shading effect. Maybe it doesn't look like this tree has been pruned much, and possibly those inner sections are just shaded enough so that the stems are not developing buds very well. I see this sometimes on older fruiting cherries that haven't been pruned very well, and they also develop these bare stem sections toward the inner part of the canopy. So I don't know in the long run if this is really a serious issue that the viewer needs to be very concerned about. Since this isn't a fruiting cherry, you don't really want to go in and prune the canopy and open it up a lot. And as the tree gets bigger, that's going to not be feasible anyway. So I don't know that this is really a big concern. It's probably something that you can just ignore and just allow the tree to grow the way that it's growing. I mean, it looks like it's a pretty healthy tree overall. Right. So I would just let this go.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Well, this week out in the garden, we finally got our plants hardened off out of the greenhouse so we could get a few of them in the ground. Nebraska Extension educator Terry James tells us more from the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, the Backyard Farmer Garden is actually getting planted. We've dodged all the rain, we've gotten all the compost on, we have all the plants that are out of the greenhouse and they're starting to get hardened off so they can go into the garden. We remembered where the tomatoes and peppers were last year, so we're going to rotate those into the next bed. So we're rotating our crops. We are adding some flowers to give that pop of color all season long to our flower beds. And we've actually got some big new containers that we're going to showcase how the people that live in an urban environment want to plant a tomato, can have tomatoes and peppers and herbs and flowers all in a container on their garden. And that's what's happening in the Backyard Farmer Garden this week.
You know, the weather has cooperated enough that our growing season is off and running. It's always fun to see how all of our plants are going to turn out in the garden, and it's just exciting every single year. All right, questions. Tom,
Kim.
Omaha viewer, what can be planted for pollinators when they don't have enough room for large shrubs?
Oh my gosh, what can't, well, okay, go native. Go big or go native. I have a very Darwinistic approach to plants at my home. I know you probably find that surprising, but if it lives, it stays. And anything that I put in any area that's been native flowers have done well. So cone flowers are doing great. Lead plant, some of the, what is it, dragonbeard or something like that. Flowering plants are doing good as long as they're adapted for the region. They do great. And pollinators love them. I've got honeybees, I've got bumblebees, I've got a myriad of all these native solitary bees. So
All right, and they can buy plants or they can do a seed mix.
You can do a seed mix. Stock Seed's got some great mixes going. So.
Myriad. We've used Myriad twice tonight.
Well, let's use it some more.
We're really great English people.
Yeah.
Your turn. Make up a new word. All right.
Use plethora.
Plethora is a better word.
We have Henbit, Speedwell, Creeping Charlie in the lawn. How do you control them?
Okay, 2 out of 3 of those are annuals. The Henbit and the Veronica are annuals, and then the Creeping Charlie is a perennial. So the approaches are going to be different. The trouble is, this Creeping Charlie looks very much like Henbit, and so what you want to look for is that in Creeping Charlie, the flower often is a darker green, a darker purple, but it's down in the, if this was the stem, the leaves are out here, it would be down right there, versus Henbit, which is out at the end and looks like a trumpet. So if you're having trouble distinguishing them, but it sounds like the viewer wasn't having that problem, but let's not talk about the perennial. That's better controlled in the fall using any of the standard sort of 3-way mixed products or whatever. You have to be persistent, and you have to get after it pretty hard. I'm assuming this is in a turf situation. The Henbit and the Veronica are both, some of the Veronicas are perennial, most of them are annuals. You can control those with pre-emergent with a late fall application with something like Preen, or you can spot treat them early in the spring of the year and knock them back with any of the broadleaf products. Be careful with that in the spring because we have a lot of trees that are emerging and people are getting ready to plant things into their yards, and I'm not really a big believer of the use of broadleaf herbicides in the spring of the year just because of the damage you can cause to the others. Speaking of damage, I damaged my reputation, which isn't uncommon. On the last one, that was Mare's Tail. I got out of sequence in the questions and was thinking about the next one, which is Curly Dock, by the way. So guess what?
You're human.
I'm humid, or I'm human. But anyway, that was Mare's Tail, and actually it's relatively easy to hoe up, and it can also be controlled with a pre-emergent. That one was really small still, though, because they're in Lincoln. They're about this tall now, so.
Right.
That's not an excuse. I'm trying to make it one. It's really failing. Let's move on to Lauren.
All right, Lauren. So we have a person who has viburnums that have borer holes, which is one concern, but their bigger concern is down at the base. They're seeing sort of some rotten, smelly, something or other going on with the root system. Are there diseases that would attack the root system of viburnum?
There are some, and it would usually be in an excessively wet situation. So, I would check and see if maybe it's a siting issue and it's close to a gutter downspout or something like that, where it's in a heavy wet situation where you could get some crown and root rots, where you would get some bark sloughing and things like that. And then a lot of times when you have that, you've got that plant that's stressed, and Tom, isn't that sometimes what will attract these borers, and then you'll have the borer holes. So, that stress plant from that crown and root rot could end up have borers as well. So probably get to that siting issue first, look at that and see if that fits, and if you can do something to help that way.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Sarah, this is a Douglas viewer. Rhubarb damaged by hail. Does the injured rhubarb transmit some toxicity in the leaves to the stem of the plant, which sounds like a can they still eat the stems question.
Yeah, no, it does not. The stems are still edible even though they're damaged. So just go ahead and trim off the little damaged pock marks on the stems and you can eat it just fine.
Are you ready, lady and gentlemen?
Sure.
Sarah, what kind of cherry tree would a person buy if they want sour pie cherries?
North Star or Montmorency are both 2 great cultivars, very winter hardy.
All right. This person wants to get rid of her hollyhocks. She knows they're biennials, and she's wondering if she keeps cutting off the seed heads, will they disappear? She's from Murdoch.
Yeah, that'll help, although you probably have a fair amount of seed in the soil, so I would put a pre-emergent down and some mulch, and that will help kill any germinating seeds.
All right. We have a viewer who started asparagus from seed. It's 12 inches tall, wants to know, is it time to plant it, and if so, how deep?
Yeah, the only thing you'd want to wait till after chances of freeze are past, and so here in the Lincoln area, that's definitely past. So I would say go ahead and plant it now. And you don't, well, you do still plant asparagus with kind of a trench method. So you go down about 6 to 8 inches and plant them, and then as they start to grow, then you fill back in as they grow.
All right, another rhubarb question. If the plant freezes, is it safe to eat?
Yes.
Prune fruit trees after flowering from Dodge or no?
You can do summer pruning of fruit trees. It's not done as much as the other type of spring pruning. It helps to reduce vigor on really, really vigorous trees. But if you wanted to do it now, you would want to do it early in the summer and not later, not like in September.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Ready, Lauren?
I'm ready.
No lunch meat? All right, this person
It's Cheese
found,
Whiz last week.
this person found a patch of something that looked like dog barf in their mulch. What is that?
Slime mold.
What do they do about it?
Wash it away. I'm trying to win. Keep it going.
Tiny, tiny gray leaves on the sycamores this year, not really expanding. Is that disease-based?
Some of those could be. Sycamore does get anthracnose. So I would guess that's anthracnose. Wet spring, when leaves are coming out, usually get that infection. I wouldn't worry about it. It's not going to kill the tree.
All right. Is it too late to spray for those serious spruce diseases that defoliate from the inside out?
You still could. It gets to the point of once we get into full needle elongation. So in that 3/4 to full needle elongation is the point. So we still have some time.
All right. How many generations of cedar apple rust are there?
I really don't know, because if it rains, they come out, the teleal horns can emerge, and they can keep coming out. I'm not exactly sure how many times they can come out, but as long as it's cool, I think it's more of a temperature dependency, most likely. And once it warms up at a certain temperature, they won't come out.
All right. Can you use baking soda spray for lawn diseases?
No.
Not bad. We'll give you some points. All right. Rock,
He got 6.
I saw that. Are you ready?
Sure.
I got 6.
All right, so this is an Aurora viewer that wants to know how soon after overseeding in the spring can their lawn be aerated?
I'm not sure why you would aerate that early, because it's not really been compacted yet. So I'm going to let it get real aggressive and wait till fall.
All right. When do we recommend using Tordon on anything lawn or weed tree related?
I'm personally not a big fan of Tordon because of its potential to move across overlapping roots. But if you're going to use it on a cut stem or whatever, let's make sure there's not a lot of things around it that could be injured.
All right. This person put pre-emerge on his turf for 30 years and never had crabgrass. He's wondering if he can go ahead and stop.
Yeah, that's actually really brilliant IPM, because if you've got rid of most of your crabgrass, you could probably go 1 or 2 years without it, and then when it starts creeping in again, nail it again. But putting it on every year isn't always critical, unless you have those little edge effects.
All right. We have a viewer who put Halt's crabgrass preventer and lawn food down April 18th, and then it got cold. Are they going to have to reapply it?
No, because heat's not going to have anything to do with either the fertilizer or the pre-emergent.
All right. Nice job.
Oh, you didn't get a nice job. You got 6, I got 4. She has no clue.
I can't count. I don't do math. All right. Are you ready, Tom?
I was born ready, Kim.
Excellent.
Let's do this.
This is a Blair viewer who wants to know if they plant milkweed seeds now, will they actually get flowers this year?
Not very likely. It'll probably emerge next year.
All right.
But do it anyway.
Okay. An Ogallala viewer wants to know whether they need to replace or clean their bee hotel every single year.
You should replace the blocks. They actually need to have new blocks drilled out. Or you could take the old ones and drill them out, but I recommend just starting new.
All right. Can you use just a single species of plant as a pollinator plant, or should you use a mix?
No, actually, you want to use a mix because you want plants that are going to be flowering throughout the season.
All right. How much milkweed is needed to attract monarchs in town? This is an Omaha viewer.
As far as I know, there isn't really a critical mass. I've got several around my house, and even when I just had a few, I was getting monarchs, so just a few is fine.
This is a DeWitt viewer who wants to know, what is a hoverfly?
A hoverfly is a flower fly. Actually, they're great little pollinators, and the immatures are predatory.
Awesome. Lauren, you won.
Good job, Lauren. Congratulate him, Rob.
I get to keep my cup tonight?
You get to keep your cup here tonight. Oh, Sarah, the poppies fell over, but
They're drooping just a little bit.
what do we have for plant of the week?
Well, of course, these beautiful orange flowers are poppies, an oriental poppy, and this is kind of the straight cultivar. It's not one of the hybrids that we see. Poppies are a great plant for the garden, though. They like kind of poor soil areas, and partial sun to full sun. Once they're established, poppies do really well in pretty hot, dry sites. and obviously blooming about now or in a couple of weeks for those in other parts of the state. Poppies don't transplant well, so you either have to plant them from seed or plant them from larger transplants. But they usually establish actually pretty well from seed, so there's no reason why you can't do that. They're a little problematic as cut flowers, though. As you can see, they tend not to take water in very well, so leave them in the garden and enjoy them out there. The other plant we have here are heartleaf golden Alexander. You can see this beautiful compound flower here. A great plant for pollinators early in the season. This is native. They tend to grow in kind of moist woodland areas, so in a cultivated landscape, they could also do really well in a rain garden situation. Get about 18 to 24 inches tall, somewhere in that size range. And that's nice, great perennial for a member of the carrot family. So a great perennial for the rain garden area.
Excellent. And if you want to see those plants for real, they're in the Backyard Farmer Garden as opposed to drooping over the container. All right, Tom, picture number 3. This is an Omaha viewer. It's ant night.
Ooh, yeah.
Has ants in the maple tree with squirrels snacking on them. Wants to know what to do to rid the tree of them, and then will the damage to the tree heal or compartmentalize?
So apparently rock has competition for ants. Squirrels are out competing them for them.
He snacks, they snack.
Yeah, he snacks. Those are carpenter ants. So they're just making a nest in a cavity that's existing in the tree. So the internal part of the tree, for whatever reason that agronomists can answer or horticulturist, is hollow. And so they go in there and they nest. It's a great protected place. Now, carpenter ants are not causing any problem to the tree. They are just using it to nest in, and they actually come out sort of in the evening and into night, and they go out and forage, and they're scavengers. They're looking for live insects, dead insects, maybe honeydew from things like aphids or scales, and maybe other things that they can bring back to the nest and starting colony. The only time I would worry about them is if they're coming inside to forage, or if you're finding them inside, you may want to look for a nesting site inside, because then you're going to have some different issues. But as long as they're outside, they're not going to cause you a problem.
All right, thank you, Tom. All right, the only question on this one is questionable weed.
God, I think I know this one. This is curly dock, which is a perennial and very prolific in the spring. Grows really, really fast. It's all over the roadsides, as I said earlier, and I'm not sure whether they wanted to control it or not, but it's a perennial, so they can hack it back and cut down into the root, like I said earlier. They can use some herbicides on it. Let's make sure we're not harming or injuring the plants that are around it. I couldn't really see from that picture. That looked like it might have been in a landscape bed.
It was.
Yeah, then they're going to have trouble doing anything but physical removal.
All right, and it is all over everything, so that's probably where it comes from, right, the seeds. All right. Lauren, we have a little bit of rust, and we have 2 or 3 people that sent us pictures of cedars.
It's been an absolutely beautiful year for cedar apple rust.
And this person said they used fruit tree spray to control it.
So a couple of things here. We'll kind of talk about cedar apple rust. So fruit tree spray would help on the apple tree. At this stage, it's not going to do anything to the juniper. So once you see the galls forming and you see these teleal horns or those gelatinous masses coming out, those are where your spores are coming from. And typically a fungicide application at that point isn't going to do anything. What you want to do is try to control the alternate host for the disease to protect that, which would be the apple tree. So if you have apples or any, pome, even some of our crab apples and such can be susceptible. So just, looking at those, if you have those and you want to protect those, you can make an application there. As far as protecting the juniper, once it goes over to apple, and then probably about, in July, late June, you'll see a flush of spores coming off of apples that would infect the juniper, and then next spring you would have those galls. So you'd want to protect it on the juniper at that point. So nothing to do with the juniper right now.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Sarah, this is a Benkelman viewer. She sent us a picture of something that popped up in her garden, and I know we're doing a head scratch on this one.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't really tell what this is. If if those buds develop a little bit more and they actually open up, with some petals or some other identification characteristics, then you could send us another picture a little bit later in the season, and hopefully we'd be able to identify it from that too. My other question though is, are the leaves that we're seeing in this picture actually associated with this buds, or are they some other plant? So knowing for sure what the leaf structure is that goes with these buds would help too. So, a picture later in the season, or if you want to bring a sample in or something so that we can actually, physically look at it, that would be helpful. But sorry, can't tell right now.
All right, more pictures is always good.
Yeah.
It would not be a garden without a few tomato plants, which are relatively easy to grow, and there's really nothing like a fresh tomato from the garden. If you head to your local garden center, you might just get dizzy looking at all the choices you have. Terry James and I did just that. For our second feature tonight, we're going to help you pick out interesting varieties for your garden. People have a love-hate relationship with tomatoes. They either love them or they hate them. If you love them, you have to figure out what you want in the garden.
There's lots of different choices to choose from too, so you kind of have to know what you want to do with those. Are you going to cook them? Are you going to can them? You can make some salsa? Are you going to slice them up for your BLT? Or are you just going to go out and pick those cherry tomatoes every night for your garden salad?
Once you've decided what you actually want your tomatoes to do for you, then you have to figure out how much room you have. You can plant them in the garden, all sorts of space. You can put them in containers. They look pretty cool in the garden, some of them, if they are a bush type or one of the ones that tumbles and comes rolling down the sides of the container in the garden, making your container an edible product and the garden itself.
There's also two different kinds that will come to ripen at two different times. There's the determinate and the indeterminate. Determinate grow to a specific size, then they set their fruit. So if you're looking at cooking them in a sauce or a salsa, that might actually be the way to go because all your fruit's going to ripen at about the same time. If you're looking at the indeterminate, those are going to be those big, tall, viney ones. They're going to keep producing fruit all summer long, and you're going to have tomatoes continuously throughout the season.
So then once you've decided what you like, you have to figure out the flavor you want. Some of the tomatoes have now been bred for uniformity, and they may not have the flavor of the old-fashioned heirloom types. If you want heirloom tomatoes, you're going to be looking at a slightly different type of a tomato. They still have all that wonderful flavor, but they are pretty ugly plants, very little, if any, disease resistance. They also don't produce a whole lot of fruits, and those fruits are very, very fragile. So they're not going to probably be your primary crop of tomatoes in the garden.
One thing to also look at is the new hybrids are bred with disease resistance. That information is all going to be on the tag, so look to see what disease resistance is bred into those tomatoes that you're purchasing.
One of the things you also then have to figure out, and this is on the tag, is how long it is going to be before those tomatoes ripen. That will be information that lets you know whether you have a long season or a short season. It lets you get the jump on your neighbors. You also have to then think about what size you're going to buy.
You can buy a 4-pack if you're gonna want all the same plant. You're gonna buy a single pack if you want multiple different kinds of tomatoes. Or if you wanna beat that neighbor, go find a big one that the nursery's already started for you.
Make sure you also know that tomatoes absolutely don't like the cold. They love this 90-degree heat, they like warm soil temperatures, and they really do the best in full sun. They'll grow like a weed. You probably are going to have to stake the big ones, so these are not actually a set it and forget it kind of a plant, but they really are a great amount of bounty for a very little amount of work. You can stick with your old favorites or try some of those really amazing new varieties or some of the old heirlooms. Just make sure you read those tags, keep an eye on them, and get ready for BLTs. All right, Tom, last picture question. This is interesting. This is a viewer who used Roundup to kill the turf around the trees and the suckers, and then wonders about whether that caused the rotten hole, and then he wants to use insecticide to keep the insects and ants out of the hole.
Okay. I may defer the first part of the question to somebody else, but it's very possible using a non-selective herbicide like that would cause that type of damage. Now, as far as the insects going into it, that's not a problem at all. Actually, they're going to be somewhat beneficial because you're going to keep it clean from things that are trying to possibly take advantage of the tree because it's weakened. So you could get all kinds of insects coming in that are trying to bore into it, and ants are just going to clean that right up. So leave them be.
All right.
Can I answer the front end of
Yes,
that
you
one?
may.
So the colored bark, you know, if the bark has any color in it at all, there is some evidence that glyphosate or the non-selectives can be taken up into, but glyphosate itself in a tan bark or some of the more common bark colors, and I'm talking about color like red twig dogwood, right? So it's really highly unlikely. Now the suckers were on there, but it really never goes. It hits at that first node and then pops back. So it really doesn't move in the tree like that. But the colored bark ones, the pigmented barks as they're called, yeah, you can get movement and it can be a problem. But that tree would have been fine. It looks like they went with the megadose too, because there's nothing growing there.
Exactly. All right, Rock.
Once and be done.
You get a question about weed control in established buffalo grass, and it's a 3-year-old stand, plugged and pretty well managed, and all of a sudden all the weeds are pure white. How is this working? Is this the right thing? What do you think here?
Well, my guess is they've sprayed this with tenacity. That looks like classical tenacity will cause weeds to turn, a susceptible species to turn white, and you're starting to see that discoloration. And the buffalo grass itself looks like it's relatively healthy. So yeah, they did have a fairly significant dandelion. They didn't want to control them because of the bees, Tom.
Yeah.
That's why they didn't
That's a
get
good
rid
thing.
of them.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is the right thing to do. Tenacity is labeled for buffalo grass. It's totally legal. It's safe. It is relatively good on dandelions. Once again, I would have preferred to see that go down in the fall of the year. But the dandelion's going to recover fine, and those are going to curl up. I'm going to suggest that if they use tenacity, or if they believe that's what had occurred, and I think they were observing this, then they're going to have to go back in 21 to 28 days after the first one to ensure that they knocked it back.
All right, thank you, Rock. Lauren, this particular person has violets as a ground cover in a very shady lawn and found this on several of the violet plants, has never seen it before. What is it?
This is the upper surface of the leaf, and then if we go to the undersurface, that's the axial stage of a rust. So when we talked earlier about cedar apple rust, this is the type of stage we would see on the apple tree. So you'd see the same thing, that blister on top of the leaf and then this on the underside. And then these spores are going over, and I don't know what they're going to though, but they'd be going to some alternate host in the landscape probably. And I had never seen this before today when I saw the picture. So, but it is a rust and something that, you know, in general on a ground cover like that, you're not going to worry too much about trying to control it, but just enjoy it and go from there.
All right, thanks, Lauren. Sarah, this is fun. This is a Lincoln viewer whose daughter lives in Wisconsin and sent us this attractive plant. They know it's a euphorbia, but they wonder which one it is.
This is cushion spurge, or Euphorbia polychroma. And so it is one of the, as they know, one of the ornamental varieties of euphorbia. Not leafy spurge, which I think was part of their question. It really likes hot, dry areas. As you can see from the picture, the first picture, even in a rock mulch area, it can do pretty well. It can reseed itself, though. It can be a little aggressive. So if it does start to become a problem, you're going to want to cut those seed heads off before they really mature and before it has a chance to disperse seed, and that can help to keep it more contained.
All right, thank you, Sarah. We always like to give you announcements of all the way cool things going on in the gardening world, and there are a lot. Sunset Hills Garden Club plant sale, Saturday, May 13th, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Address on the screen. Our second one is Planting Time Always Garden Club 15th Annual Plant and Garden Art Sale, Saturday, May 13th in Carter Lake, Iowa. Third one tonight is the Lincoln Iris Society's annual show, also the 13th. Phone number on the screen for more information on that one. We also have one that is the Greater Omaha Iris Society annual show, Saturday the 20th. Also a number on the screen for that one. And we have an announcement about Produce from the Heart, which we are doing in the Backyard Farmer Garden and a couple of other locations. You can donate your extra produce every Tuesday through September from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. in our very own Backyard Farmer Garden. So that's going to be a very cool program. All right, we have just a bit of time left for catch you off guard questions.
Thank you.
Papillion viewer Tom has a 50-foot tall linden, Japanese beetles, wonders, do we know, is this going to be a bad year, and how would you treat, or would you treat a monster big linden?
Is it going to be a bad year? We didn't have much of a winter, so overwintering survival is going to be pretty good. It's hard to say what the adults will be. There could be disease. We've had some wet. Hopefully there's been some disease, so we'll find out. But big tree like that, there's going to be some defoliation, but it's going to occur later in the summer from the adults, and I wouldn't worry about it.
All right, thank you, Tom. Rock, this is a Crete viewer who says poison hemlock is showing up in Crete and wonders how to treat it to get rid of it because he's worried about the toxicity to people.
So I'm guessing it's probably, I mean, you see it along roadsides, you see it in lower areas, is a tendency there. And you know, it's actually relatively easy to, I mean, you have to consume it it's not like poison ivy. So you can go in there and cut it back, mow it back. You can spray it, certainly you can spray it, but you know, I'm not sure of the location. I can't really recommend a specific herbicide for that in that particular situation because I don't know if it's in and among other desirable broadleafs or not. But you know, I mean, I understand the toxicity issues and being concerned about it, but this is all along the highways, and we don't really, the incidence of, you know, poison hemlock poisoning, unless they have small children or something that they're worried about getting into into it and starting to chew on it, I guess I would just cut it back and make sure they dispose of the plant material in a way that things that want to consume it couldn't get to it. And you know, dogs will chew on it, and I'm assuming it's in a yard. I guess I don't have really all the information.
I think it's pasture.
Oh, it's in a pasture, so they're worried about to their animals.
Right.
Yeah, then they need to talk to a range specialist that can give them a better herbicide recommendation. So, like, I'm 0 for 5 tonight.
No.
Really not good.
No, you're not, because you gave all the right information on that one. All right, Lauren, we have people wondering when that cool fungus hen of the woods is going to be seen.
Well, that'll be much later in the year. So usually the hen of the woods, Griffolia, shows up in that September window. So I'd look, you know, mid to late September into October usually.
All right, thank you.
Around oak trees typically.
Oaks, all right.
Can I suggest to the viewer, go to the Weed Guide for Nebraska. It's online, and it's you can search on the document. You could search for poison hemlock, and it would tell you what's labeled in the range. I hate to not get an answer out there that, you know, they're going to have to call somebody or whatever. But the Guide for Nebraska Weed Control is where I would go.
Excellent, thank you, Rock. Sarah from Ord, we have a viewer whose butterfly bush did not survive the winter and is wondering, are they short-lived perennials?
No, I would say no, probably not. But you do need to site them well. They you know, are susceptible to fluctuating temperatures in the winter, which can result in more dieback. So just make sure that it's trying to think what would be the best place to put it.
Sun.
Yeah, they do like sun. Try to get it out of the wind. Try to provide a little bit of wind protection. Don't put it next to something that's going to warm up really a lot during the winter months. Extra mulch in the fall might help with better winter survivability. So those would be the things that I would kind of look at, I think.
Right, and we do always expect them to die all the way back.
Yeah, they do die back, significantly.
All right, Tom, quickly, we have a question about heritage raspberries with very small white worms in the berries when they're ripe. What is it and how do you prevent it?
Probably spotted winged Drosophila, and what you want to start to do early in the season is put out vinegar traps to see if you can trap some, and once you trap some, there's a couple techniques you could use, like trying to put a barrier over them, a mesh or something like that is a great organic way. Sprays are tricky because you have post-harvest intervals that you have to pay attention to.
All right, Rock, in 10 seconds, how soon after using a fertilizer plus a pre can you compost the clippings?
Those will degrade really fast. So the pre-emergents actually degrade really quick, so you can throw it into the composted clippings almost immediately. Make sure you get it up to the 160 or whatever the magic number is.
All right, awesome, thank you.